The board meeting at Pinnacle Luxury Resorts was supposed to address fourth quarter projections. Instead, 12 executives huddled around tablets displaying devastating headlines that threatened a century-old hospitality empire. Billionaire playboy caught cheating 3 days before wedding to hotel heiress. Fenro fortune in jeopardy as wedding plans crumble. Will Veronica Fenro lose everything? The photographs were undeniable. Harrison Blackwood sprawled across a yacht in Monaco with socialite twins, arms around one while kissing the other. By the time the Phoenix sun had cleared the horizon, Pinnacle stock had plummeted 15%. Harold Brennan, silver-haired board chairman who'd weathered 4 generations of Fenro family drama, stood at the polished mahogany table with the grim expression of someone delivering a death sentence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice heavy with 4 decades of corporate warfare, "we're facing an extinction-level event." Through floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown, Phoenix stretched toward the horizon, the Desert Palace Hotel, Pinnacle's flagship property, gleaming like a mirage in the distance. None of the board members admired the view. Their focus remained locked on the document displayed on the wall-mounted screen. The Fenro Family Trust, established by Victoria's great-grandfather in 1924, contains a matrimonial clause that seemed quaint when written, but is now our potential destruction. Section 4.82 clearly stated that controlling interest in Pinnacle Luxury Resorts is passed to the eldest Fenro heir upon marriage, but only if said marriage occurred before their 35th birthday. Should this condition remain unfulfilled, controlling interest reverted to the Fenro Foundation Board. The silence in the room was suffocating. Everyone understood what external management meant, a hostile takeover disguised as philanthropy. The Fenro Foundation Board consisted primarily of competitors who'd been circling Pinnacle for years. Margaret Sterling, chief financial officer, cleared her throat. "Harold, what's our timeline?" "Veronica turns 35 on Thursday. Today is Tuesday." 48 hours, Sterling muttered, the implications hitting the room like a tsunami. Pinnacle wasn't just a company. It was a lifestyle empire spanning 37 countries. 5-star hotels, exclusive resorts, private clubs, built on a century of carefully cultivated reputation. Legal counsel David Martinez shuffled through documents with desperate efficiency. "I've reviewed every clause, every amendment, every addendum. There are no exceptions, no extensions, no alternative interpretations. Marriage before the 35th birthday, or the company, is gone." "What about Harrison?" asked marketing director Janet Walsh, though her voice lacked hope. Brennan's laugh was bitter. "Harrison Blackwood released a statement an hour ago, officially ending the engagement. His legal team is already extracting him from financial obligations. The cheating was just the public face of what's been a loveless arrangement for months." The room erupted in controlled panic. Could they find another suitable husband in 48 hours? Challenge the trust in court, restructure the company. "Even if we could find someone," Sterling pointed out, "the legal requirements include proper documentation, waiting periods in most states, blood tests in some jurisdictions. We don't have time." That's when Harold Brennan noticed the quiet figure in the corner of the boardroom. Alex Thornwell had entered 20 minutes earlier to empty wastebaskets and replace water bottles. Tasks he performed with invisible efficiency. At 42, he possessed the kind of understated presence that allowed him to move through spaces like a ghost, noticed only when something needed fixing. He stood 6'2" with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of physical labor rather than gym memberships. His dark hair was conservatively cut, showing threads of silver at the temples. His maintenance uniform was clean and pressed, worn with a dignity that somehow elevated what should have been menial clothing. As board members continued their frantic discussions, Alex methodically continued his work. He'd heard every word, impossible not to, in the acoustically perfect boardroom, but maintained professional invisibility. Brennan's eyes fixed on him with the sudden intensity of a drowning man spotting driftwood. "You there?" he called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Maintenance." The room fell silent. Alex straightened from where he'd been replacing the water bottle, turning to face the board with calm attention. "Yes, sir." Alex's voice was steady, neither servile nor defensive. There was something in his tone suggesting this wasn't a man easily rattled, even when summoned by executives in crisis mode. Brennan studied him for a long moment. "What's your name?" "Alex Thornwell, sir. Night maintenance supervisor." "Are you married, Mr. Thornwell?" The question caught everyone off guard. Several board members exchanged confused glances. Alex's expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his dark eyes. No, sir, I'm not married. Any significant relationships, engagements, romantic complications that would prevent you from marrying immediately. Now the board members understood Brennan's thinking, and the collective intake of breath was audible. It was so outrageous, so desperate, that it might actually work. Alex's eyebrows rose slightly, the first crack in his professional composure. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not sure I understand the relevance of my personal life to maintenance duties. Before Brennan could respond, the boardroom doors burst open with the controlled violence of someone accustomed to making dramatic entrances. Veronica Fenrose strode into the room like a force of nature barely contained in a designer suit. At 34, she possessed the kind of commanding presence that made boardrooms feel smaller and subordinates feel smaller still. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a severe style that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and piercing green eyes. Her charcoal Armani suit was impeccably tailored, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the precision of a countdown timer. She'd clearly been awake all night dealing with lawyers, publicists, and damage control specialists, but showed no signs of exhaustion. If anything, she radiated the dangerous energy of someone backed into a corner and ready to fight her way out. I assume you've all seen the headlines, she said without preamble, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone born to command. I assume you've all reviewed the trust documents. I assume you all understand exactly how catastrophic this situation has become. She moved to the head of the table, claiming her position as CEO. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging expressions, measuring loyalty, calculating who would stand with her and who would abandon ship. So, she continued, her tone deceptively calm. What solutions are we proposing? The boardroom remained silent. What could they say that they'd been discussing finding her a husband in 48 hours? That they'd been calculating the company's dissolution value? That's when Veronica's gaze fell on Alex Thornwell, still standing quietly in the corner, with a half-empty trash bag in his hands, inadvertently witness to the most important crisis in Pinnacle's history. Their eyes met across the room, and for just a moment time seemed suspended. She saw something in his steady gaze. Not fear or excitement she'd expected from an employee suddenly thrust into corporate drama, but something else entirely. Assessment, understanding, and perhaps impossibly, a flicker of sympathy. In that moment, with 48 hours until everything she'd ever known disappeared, Veronica Fenrose made the decision that would change everything. She walked across the room with predatory grace, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Alex remained exactly where he was, neither advancing nor retreating, his dark eyes following her approach with the calm attention of someone accustomed to being scrutinized. When she stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could smell her expensive perfume, something sophisticated and cold like winter roses mixed with steel, the height difference was minimal. In her 4-inch heels, she nearly matched his 6'2" frame. Mr. Thornwell, she said, her voice carrying dangerous sweetness, you've been listening to our conversation. It wasn't a question. Alex nodded once, neither apologizing nor making excuses. I was performing my duties, ma'am. I couldn't help but overhear. And what exactly did you overhear? That Pinnacle Luxury Resorts will cease to exist as a Fenrose company in 48 hours unless you marry before your 35th birthday. His response was matter-of-fact, neither judgmental nor sympathetic. Several board members winced at the brutal summary. Veronica's lips curved into something that might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. Remarkably concise. You understand complex business situations quickly for someone who empties trash cans for a living. The insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to remind everyone of the vast gulf between a billionaire heiress and a night janitor. But Alex's expression didn't change. He'd clearly endured worse. I understand that desperate situations require desperate solutions, he replied calmly. I also understand that you're considering asking me to marry you. The directness of his statement sent a shockwave through the boardroom. Several members gasped audibly. Margaret Sterling nearly choked on her coffee. Even Harold Brennan looked stunned that the janitor had cut straight to the heart of the matter. Veronica's eyes narrowed. She'd expected embarrassment, stammering, maybe a hasty retreat. She hadn't expected this quiet competence that seemed completely unimpressed by either her wealth or her desperation. "And what makes you think," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that I would ever consider marrying someone so far beneath my social station?" "Because," Alex replied with infuriating calm, "47 hours from now, you won't have a social station left to protect." The accuracy of his assessment hit like a physical blow. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth they'd been dancing around. "You have no idea who you're talking to," she said, her voice rising with the kind of authority that had made competitors flee. "I am Veronica Fenro. My family built this company when your grandfather was probably shoveling coal. I have a Harvard MBA controlling interest in 37 luxury properties and a net worth that exceeds the GDP of small nations." Alex listened without visible reaction, then asked quietly, "And how much will all of that be worth on Thursday morning?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Everyone knew the answer, but hearing it spoken by the maintenance staff felt like the final insult. "I could have you fired right now," Veronica said, her voice trembling with rage and something that might have been panic. "One word from me, and you'll never work in this city again." "Yes, ma'am, you could." Alex's acknowledgement was neither defiant nor submissive. "But that won't solve your problem." "Veronica," Harold Brennan finally found his voice. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," she cut him off without taking her eyes off Alex. "If we're going to discuss the unthinkable, we'll discuss it openly." She began to pace her controlled movements, reminding everyone of a caged predator. "You want to know what the unthinkable is, Mr. Thornwell? The unthinkable is that I, Veronica Elizabeth Fenro, might actually have to marry a janitor to save my company." The words were designed to wound to establish hierarchy, to make it clear that any arrangement would be charity on her part. But Alex's expression remained unchanged. "The unthinkable," she continued, building momentum like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument, "is that someone who cleans toilets for a living might end up with access to a fortune he could never earn in 1,000 lifetimes." She stopped directly in front of him again, close enough that he could see the fury and desperation warring in her green eyes. "The unthinkable is that I might actually be desperate enough to consider it." The boardroom was so quiet that the building's ventilation system sounded like a roar. Everyone waited to see how the maintenance worker would respond to being offered the opportunity of several lifetimes, while simultaneously being insulted in ways that would have sent most men running. Alex studied her face for a long moment, reading something in her expression that others might have missed. When he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way that somehow made his words more devastating than any anger. "Miss Fenro, I've been cleaning offices in this city for 6 years. I've seen a lot of powerful people having a lot of bad days, but I've never seen someone work so hard to convince themselves that they're better than a situation they're trapped in." The observation struck home with surgical precision. Veronica's face flushed, whether with embarrassment or rage, it was impossible to tell. "You think you understand me?" she asked, her voice dangerous. "I think," Alex replied carefully, "that you're scared. I think you've never been in a situation where money and power couldn't solve your problems. I think you're lashing out at me because I'm safe to attack. Just a janitor who can't fight back without losing his job." The accuracy of his assessment was terrifying. Several board members looked away, uncomfortable with witnessing their CEO being psychoanalyzed by the help. "But mostly," Alex continued, "I think you're angry at yourself for being in a position where marrying a stranger is your only option." Veronica stared at him with a mixture of shock and something that might have been respect. In 34 years of life surrounded by yes men and sycophants, very few people had ever spoken to her with such unflinching honesty. "So," she said, her voice regaining some of its authoritative edge, "what do you propose, Mr. Thornwell? Are you going to save me from my predicament?" Alex set down his trash bag with deliberate care, giving himself a moment to consider his response. When he looked back at her, there was something different in his expression. A decision being made. "I propose," he said quietly, "that we stop pretending this is about charity or desperation or social stations. You need a husband. I'm legally eligible. The question isn't whether I'm good enough for you. The question is whether this arrangement serves both our interests." The shift in tone was remarkable. Suddenly, this wasn't a powerful woman condescending to a lowly employee. It was two adults discussing a mutually beneficial agreement. And what interests would those be? Veronica asked, her curiosity clearly piqued despite herself. That, Alex replied with a slight smile that transformed his entire face, is something we should discuss privately. Assuming, of course, that you're actually serious about this proposal and not just amusing yourself by humiliating the help. The challenge was subtle but unmistakable. He had called her bluff, forcing her to either commit to the insane plan or admitted she'd been wasting everyone's time. Veronica looked around the boardroom at 12 people witnessing either the most brilliant solution in corporate history or the most spectacular breakdown of a CEO under pressure. Mr. Brennan, she said, without taking her eyes off Alex, clear the boardroom. Mr. Thornwell and I need to discuss terms. The boardroom emptied with efficient speed. Harold Brennan was the last to leave, pausing at the door with a concerned expression that spoke of decades watching Fenro family members make decisions that would either be remembered as brilliant or catastrophic. Veronica, are you certain about this? She turned from the floor to ceiling windows, where she'd been staring at the Phoenix skyline, her reflection ghost-like against the afternoon sun. I've never been certain about anything in my life, Harold, but certainty is a luxury I can't afford right now. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Veronica alone with Alex Thornwell and the weight of 4 generations of family history. She remained by the windows, using the reflection to study the man who might become her husband in less than 48 hours. He'd taken a seat at the conference table, his posture relaxed but alert, neither presumptuous nor intimidated. Before we discuss terms, she said without turning around, you should understand exactly what you'd be marrying into, what you'd be saving. Her voice carried a different quality now, less authority, more exhaustion. The weight of maintaining perfection for 34 years showed cracks. My great-grandfather, Theodore Fenro, built the first Pinnacle Hotel in 1924 with money borrowed from his wife's family and determination that bordered on obsession. She turned from the window, beginning a slow circuit of the boardroom that felt like a ritual of remembrance. Her fingers trailed along the mahogany table that had hosted a century of family decisions. Theodore wasn't born wealthy. His father was a railroad worker. His mother took in laundry to make ends meet, but he had vision. He could see what Phoenix would become when it was still just a dusty frontier town. Alex listened without interruption, recognizing that this wasn't a business presentation, but something more personal. A woman trying to justify why preserving a legacy was worth marrying a stranger. The hotel was an immediate success. Theodore understood something his competitors missed. Luxury wasn't just about expensive furnishings and fancy food. It was about making people feel special, important, worthy of the best life had to offer. Every detail mattered. Every guest was treated like royalty. Her circuit brought her to a portrait hanging on the far wall, a stern-faced man in a 1920s suit standing proudly in front of an elegant hotel facade. Theodore Fenro looked like a man who'd never doubted a decision in his life. By 1930, there were 3 Pinnacle hotels. By 1948, Theodore had revolutionized hospitality. But more than that, he'd created something lasting, a family legacy that would employ thousands, serve millions, and stand as proof that vision and determination could build empires. She paused at another portrait, a woman in 1940s, elegant dress, beautiful, but with shadows in her eyes that suggested the cost of being married to an empire builder. That's Eleanor, Theodore's wife. She gave up her own dreams of being a concert pianist to support his vision. Their marriage was strategic, arranged by their families to combine her family's money with his ambition. But somewhere along the way, they found love. Real love, the kind that survives everything the world throws at it. Alex studied the portrait, noting the way Eleanor's hand rested on Theodore's shoulder with possessive pride. They look happy. They were for 34 years until Eleanor died of tuberculosis. Theodore never remarried. He poured all his grief into building the company, expanding across the country, establishing standards that still define luxury hospitality today. She moved to the next generation, a man in a 1950s military uniform while standing beside a woman in a wedding dress. My grandfather, William Fenro, Theodore's only son. He inherited the company at 28 when Theodore died of a heart attack. William was different from his father, more cautious, more concerned with preservation than expansion. Her voice softened as she looked at another portrait. Grandmother Patricia was the first Fenro woman to take an active role in the business. She handled interior design staff, training the details that made guests feel at home. Under their joint leadership, Pinnacle became synonymous with family values and personal service. Her expression hardened. But William made one crucial mistake. He added the matrimonial clause to the family trust. He'd seen too many family businesses torn apart by heirs who married poorly, who brought in spouses that diluted the family vision or created conflicts. Alex frowned. So the clause was meant to ensure stable marriages. It was meant to ensure that controlling interest only passed to heirs who demonstrated commitment to family stability. Marriage was proof of maturity, responsibility, readiness to continue the legacy. Her laugh was bitter. William couldn't have foreseen how marriage itself would change, how the social expectations of the 1950s would become obstacles in the 2020s. She moved to more recent portraits, her parents looking glamorous in 1980s style. My father, Richard Fenro, inherited the company at 30 after marrying my mother, Catherine Sterling, in what the society pages called the wedding of the decade. Two hospitality dynasties joining forces, creating something even more powerful. But as she stared at her parents' portrait, her expression hardened. What the society pages didn't cover was how quickly love can turn to strategy and strategy to warfare. My parents' marriage was perfect for the first 10 years. They expanded internationally, established Pinnacle as a global brand, had me as their heir. She touched her mother's face in the portrait with one finger, a gesture so tender it revealed depths of pain she usually kept hidden. Then my mother discovered that my father had been having affairs, not just one, but many for years, with employees, with competitors' wives, with anyone who made him feel powerful and desired. Alex saw her shoulders tense, the corporate armor sliding back into place as she approached painful territory. The divorce was vicious, not because of the money. Prenups protected most of the family assets, but because my mother fought for controlling interest in the company. She argued that she'd contributed equally to Pinnacle's success, that the matrimonial clause shouldn't apply if the marriage ended due to the husband's infidelity. Who won? My father, technically. The trust language was ironclad. Controlling interest remained with the Fenro bloodline regardless of divorce. But my mother won the war. She took her settlement and started a competing luxury chain, Sterling Hospitality Group. She spent the next 15 years systematically poaching our best employees, our most exclusive locations, our most valuable clients. Veronica's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She destroyed my father professionally and personally. He started drinking, making increasingly desperate business decisions until he finally died of liver failure when I was 25. I inherited a company that was bleeding money, reputation, and market share. But you saved it, Alex said with certainty. She turned to look at him, surprised. How do you know that? Because we're standing in a boardroom on the 47th floor of a building that bears your family's name, discussing a company worth billions, rather than the remnants of a failed empire. You didn't just inherit Pinnacle, you rebuilt it. The observation was accurate and somehow comforting. It took 9 years, she admitted. 9 years of 18-hour days of learning every aspect of the business, of proving to employees and competitors and board members that I wasn't just Richard Fenro's daughter trading on Daddy's legacy. She returned to her position by the windows, using the reflection to avoid direct eye contact, while revealing the most personal part of her story. I swore I would never make my parents' mistakes, never let emotion cloud business judgment, never trust anyone enough to be betrayed. I dated strategically, entered relationships that enhanced the company's profile, ended them when they stopped being mutually beneficial. Including Harrison. Especially Harrison, her reflection smiled without humor. Our engagement was perfect on paper. Two hospitality empires merging, creating economies of scale and market dominance that would have revolutionized luxury travel. Harrison brought shipping connections and international properties. I brought land holdings and brand recognition. But no love. Love is a luxury that CEOs can't afford. Love makes you vulnerable. Love makes you stupid. Love makes you trust people who will inevitably disappoint you. The words came out like a recitation, something she'd told herself so often it had become doctrine. Alex was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd revealed. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but direct. Why are you telling me this? Why does a janitor you met an hour ago need to understand 4 generations of family history? She turned to face him fully, her green eyes bright with unshed tears she was too proud to let fall. Because in 46 hours, everything my family built could disappear. Because I'm about to ask you to enter into a marriage that's purely strategic, knowing that strategic marriages destroyed both my parents. She moved closer, her voice growing more intense. Because I need you to understand that saving Pinnacle isn't just about preserving wealth. It's about honoring the sacrifices of everyone who came before us. And because, she added so quietly he almost missed it, I need you to know that I've never trusted anyone enough to tell them this story. If we're going to do this impossible thing, you deserve to know exactly who you're saving. Alex sat in the leather executive chair that probably cost more than he made in 6 months watching Veronica Fenro wrestle with generations of family pressure and personal pain. Her story had revealed depths he hadn't expected. Not just wealth and privilege, but genuine love for something larger than herself. Now, he said quietly, let me tell you who you'd be marrying. Veronica returned to the conference table, taking a seat across from him with the cautious attention of someone preparing for either revelation or disappointment. She'd gambled everything on his response to her desperate proposal, but she realized she knew nothing about the man who might become her husband. Alex steepled his fingers, considering how to compress a lifetime of choices into an explanation that would help her understand what she was getting into. 12 years ago, I was Captain Alexander Thornwell, United States Army Corps of Engineers, stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I had a mechanical engineering degree from Virginia Tech, specialized training in infrastructure development, and a promising career designing power grids and water systems for forward operating bases. The transformation of his voice was subtle but unmistakable. The careful neutrality of a service worker giving way to the confident cadence of someone accustomed to briefing senior officers and making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Veronica's eyes widened slightly. Whatever she'd expected from her night janitor's backstory, military leadership hadn't been on the list. I wasn't career Army initially. I'd planned to serve 4 years, get my education benefits, then transition to civilian engineering. But I discovered I was good at military logistics. Really good. I could see how systems interconnected, how fixing one problem could prevent 3 others, how efficient resource allocation could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. He stood and moved to the windows, looking out as afternoon faded toward evening. By my 8th year, I was on track for major, possibly lieutenant colonel. I'd served 3 deployments in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, building infrastructure that kept our people alive and operational. I loved the work, loved the responsibility, loved being part of something bigger than myself. What changed? Veronica asked, though she suspected she already knew. Men didn't go from military careers to maintenance work without significant personal drama. I got married. Sarah Mitchell, a nurse I met during a rotation at Walter Reed. She was beautiful, intelligent, dedicated to helping people. We had the kind of whirlwind romance that military families specialize in, intense, passionate, built on the knowledge that time together is always limited by deployment schedules. His reflection in the window showed a slight smile, a ghost of happier memories. We got married after 6 months of dating. Sarah was willing to be a military wife to handle the separations and uncertainty. For 2 years, it worked perfectly. We were planning to start a family, maybe buy a house near the base, build the kind of stable life military couples dream about. The smile faded as he reached the difficult part of his story. Then Sarah got pregnant. Emma was born in March 2018, the most beautiful baby you've ever seen. Sarah was an amazing mother, patient, nurturing, everything you'd want for your daughter. I took leave when Emma was born, spent 3 weeks just marveling at this perfect little person we'd created. Veronica heard the past tense and felt her stomach clench. This was heading toward tragedy, the kind of loss that explained how a military officer became a night janitor. When Emma was 4 months old, I got deployment orders. 7 months in Afghanistan, working on a major infrastructure project. Standard rotation, nothing unusual. Sarah supported the deployment. She knew it was important for my career, and she'd handled previous deployments just fine. Alex turned from the window, meeting Veronica's eyes directly. I left when Emma was 5 months old. Sarah brought her to the base for the farewell ceremony. I remember thinking how lucky I was. Amazing wife, beautiful daughter, meaningful work that served my country. Life was perfect. His voice grew hoarse. 3 weeks into my deployment, I got the call that every military spouse dreads: car accident. Sarah had been driving to her sister's house with Emma hit by a drunk driver running a red light. Sarah died at the scene. Emma was critical traumatic brain injury, multiple surgeries required uncertain prognosis. The raw pain in his voice made Veronica's chest tighten. She'd shared her family's business struggles, but this was genuine human tragedy. I was on a transport home within 12 hours, but those 12 hours felt like 12 years. When I got to the hospital, Emma was in a coma connected to machines keeping her alive. The doctors weren't sure she'd survive, and if she did, they couldn't predict what kind of recovery she might have. Alex returned to his seat, his hands clasped tightly on the polished table surface. For 6 weeks, I lived in that hospital. I learned about traumatic brain injuries, rehabilitation protocols, the kind of round-the-clock care Emma would need if she recovered. The Army granted extended compassionate leave, but I knew my military career was effectively over. Did she recover? Veronica asked softly. She did. Emma is now 11 years old in 6th grade and brilliant despite the challenges she faces. The brain injury affected her motor coordination and speech development, but not her intelligence. She needs special education, support, physical therapy, occupational therapy. She needs a parent who can be present, consistent, available. The picture was becoming clear. You chose her over your career. It wasn't really a choice. The military couldn't provide the stability Emma needed. Deployments were out of the question. Even stateside assignments meant long hours, frequent transfers, the kind of uncertainty that would be devastating for a daughter recovering from trauma. Alex's voice carried no self-pity, just matter-of-fact acceptance of circumstances beyond his control. I resigned my commission, used my savings to move to Phoenix, where Emma could receive excellent care at the Barrow Neurological Institute. I needed work that provided health insurance, but allowed flexible scheduling for therapy appointments, school conferences, the constant medical management Emma's condition requires. So you became a janitor. I became whatever was necessary to be Emma's father first and everything else second. Janitorial work pays reasonably well, especially night shifts that allow me to be available during Emma's school hours. The job provides excellent health insurance through the building management company, and most importantly, it allows me to be home when she needs me. Veronica studied his face, seeing something she hadn't expected. Not shame or regret about his career change, but quiet pride in choices made for love rather than ambition. For 6 years, that's been my life. Emma's therapies, her education, her gradual progress toward independence. I've watched her learn to walk again, speak clearly, write at grade level despite challenges. She's extraordinary and deserves every sacrifice I've made. Where is she now? With Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor who watches her when I work night shifts. Emma does her homework practice at piano. She's remarkably musical for someone with motor coordination challenges, and usually falls asleep reading robotics magazines. She wants to be an engineer someday to build things that help people with disabilities. The love in his voice was unmistakable, and Veronica felt something twist in her chest. Envy, perhaps, for the kind of uncomplicated devotion she'd never experienced. So when you consider marrying me, Alex continued, you need to understand that Emma comes first always. Any arrangement we make has to account for her needs, her schedule, her future. I won't compromise her well-being for any amount of money or social position. You'd be giving up anonymity, Veronica pointed out. Marriage to me means media attention, public scrutiny. Emma's story becomes part of the narrative. I've considered that. Emma is strong enough to handle attention, especially if it comes with resources that could improve her life. Better medical care, educational opportunities, maybe funding for the assistive technology research she's interested in. Alex leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. But you need to understand, I'm not looking to be rescued from my current life. I'm not ashamed of being a janitor, and I'm not desperate for wealth or status. If we do this, it's because it serves both our needs, not because I'm grateful for the opportunity to marry above my station. The directness of his statement was both impressive and slightly unsettling. Veronica had expected gratitude, maybe even awe at the opportunity she was offering. Instead, she was getting a negotiation between equals. What would you want from this arrangement? Security for Emma, medical insurance that covers all her therapies without copays or coverage limits. An educational trust fund that ensures she can attend any college, pursue any career her abilities allow. Legal protection through marriage that gives me standing to advocate for her interests if anything happens to me. He paused, considering his next words carefully. And respect. If we're going to be married even for business purposes, I want to be treated as a partner, not a charity case or a convenient solution to your problems. Veronica felt a flutter of something that might have been respect. In a single conversation, Alex Thornwell had proven more emotionally mature and psychologically stable than most of the men she dated in the past decade. There's something else you should know about why I'm willing to consider this arrangement, Alex said quietly. What's that? I've been watching you for 6 months, Miss Fenrow. Seeing her expression, he added quickly, not stalking, but observing. I work in this building. I see how you treat people, how you handle pressure, how you make decisions. He met her eyes directly. You're not the cold, heartless executive the media portrays. You stay late to help junior employees with projects. You remember the names of security guards and maintenance staff. You tip the food service workers better than any other executive in this building. Veronica felt heat rise in her cheeks, uncomfortable with being seen so clearly. Most importantly, Alex continued, you keep your word. When you promise something, you deliver. That matters to someone like me, someone whose daughter's future depends on being able to trust the adults in her life. The compliment was unexpected and somehow more meaningful than any flowery praise she'd ever received. So when I consider marrying you, Alex concluded, I'm not just considering a business arrangement. I'm considering partnership with someone I've observed to be trustworthy, intelligent, and fundamentally decent, despite the circumstances that brought us to this conversation. Veronica stared at him for a long moment, realizing that her desperate gamble might have accidentally connected her with exactly the kind of person she'd spent 34 years avoiding, someone who saw her clearly and chose to stay anyway. But there was one more revelation to come. Alex stood and moved to the whiteboard, scanning blueprints of Pinnacle properties hanging on the boardroom wall, detailed infrastructure schematics that most people would find incomprehensible. I know these plans, he said quietly, pointing to a complex schematic for the Desert Palace Hotel, not just as someone who's worked in building maintenance, but specifically, I helped design the power grid updates for this property 3 years ago. Veronica frowned, not understanding. I'm sure many contractors worked on that project. Not as a contractor, Alex turned to face her, his expression serious. As a consulting engineer for Morrison Technical Solutions under the name Alexander Mitchell. I was still using my late wife's surname then, before I legally changed back to Thornwell. The name Morrison Technical Solutions jolted Veronica's memory. It was the consulting firm that had handled several major infrastructure upgrades across Pinnacle properties, including electrical modernizations that had improved efficiency by 30%, while reducing operational costs by millions annually. That's impossible, she said slowly. Morrison Technical only worked with senior engineers, people with advanced degrees and extensive experience in luxury hospitality systems. Alex moved to a filing cabinet, pulling out a folder containing technical specifications for the building's infrastructure. He opened it to a page covered with complex calculations, annotations, and system modifications. Section 4.3 Subsystem Modifications for peak load distribution during convention occupancy, he said, pointing to handwritten notes in the margin. I wrote those calculations. The original design called for a 15% increase in generator capacity, but I determined that smart load balancing could achieve the same result with only a 6% increase, saving Pinnacle approximately $2 million in equipment costs. Veronica stared at the technical drawings, recognizing the handwriting from modification notes she'd personally approved 3 years earlier. But the Morrison technical engineers we worked with were all highly credentialed professionals with impressive resumes and corporate positions, Alex finished. And I was one of them. Alexander Mitchell, senior infrastructure engineer, specializing in hospitality and commercial properties. He returned to his seat, his demeanor now carrying hints of the professional authority he'd once wielded. After Emma's accident, I couldn't maintain a full-time engineering position, but Morrison Technical hired me as an independent contractor for specific projects, flexible scheduling, work-from-home capability, complex problem-solving that could be done during Emma's school hours. For 3 years, I consulted on various Pinnacle projects, not just infrastructure, but operational efficiency, cost reduction, system optimization. I know your properties better than most of your staff because I've studied every mechanical, electrical, and structural system across 12 locations. The revelation was staggering. Veronica's mind raced through implications, connections, the bizarre coincidence that had placed a consultant she'd unknowingly worked with into her most desperate hour. The Morrison technical work ended 18 months ago, Alex continued. Emma's needs became more complex, requiring more consistent presence, and I couldn't maintain even the flexible consulting schedule. I took the maintenance position because it provided security and allowed me to be the father Emma needed. But you kept all the technical knowledge. You don't forget 15 years of engineering training because you changed jobs. I still read industry journals, follow developments in hospitality infrastructure, maintain my professional certifications. Emma's interested in engineering. We work on projects together, theoretical designs for accessibility improvements. Veronica felt a strange combination of shock and vindication. Her instincts about Alex had been correct. There was something different about him, something that suggested capabilities beyond his current position. So, Alex said, when you offered to marry me, you weren't just offering marriage to a janitor. You were offering marriage to someone who understands your business, who's contributed to its success, who knows exactly what preserving Pinnacle Luxury Resorts means from both operational and financial perspectives. The implications were profound. Marriage to Alex wouldn't just fulfill the trust requirements. It would bring genuine business expertise back into the company knowledge that had already proven valuable. There's more, Alex continued, opening another folder. During my consulting work, I identified several operational inefficiencies that could save Pinnacle approximately $12 million annually. I prepared recommendations, but Morrison Technical's contract ended before I could present them. He handed her a detailed report professionally bound with the kind of comprehensive analysis that would typically cost hundreds of thousands of dollars from a top-tier consulting firm. $12 million in cost savings. Conservative estimate. The report covers energy management staff, scheduling optimization, supply chain improvements, and guest service technologies that could improve satisfaction scores while reducing operational costs. Veronica set down the report, staring at Alex with new understanding. You've been planning this. No, he said quietly. I've been surviving doing whatever work I could find that met Emma's needs. But when you asked me to consider marriage, I realized I had more to offer than just legal eligibility. He leaned forward, his voice taking on the confident tone of someone presenting a business proposal. If we do this, Veronica, it's not charity, it's partnership. You get a husband who fulfills the trust requirements, but you also get an engineer who understands your business, who's already contributed to its success, who can help you build something even better. The boardroom felt different now, not like a desperate negotiation between unequal parties, but like a strategic planning session between potential partners. Veronica's mind was already racing through possibilities, seeing how Alex's expertise could be integrated back into Pinnacle's operations. Emma, she said suddenly, your daughter, how does she feel about your engineering background? Does she know what you gave up? Alex's expression softened. Emma knows I was a soldier and an engineer before she got hurt. She knows I chose to be her dad over everything else. But she also knows that choosing her didn't make me less intelligent or less capable. She's actually excited about the possibility that I might get to use my engineering skills again. The board is going to be shocked. The board, Alex replied with a slight smile, is going to discover that sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources. They've been working with my expertise for years without knowing it. Now they'll get to work with it directly. For the next 30 minutes, Alex transformed from night janitor to consulting engineer, outlining innovations that could revolutionize hospitality operations. His ideas were sophisticated, practical, and immediately implementable. More importantly, they demonstrated a deep understanding of Pinnacle's culture values and operational philosophy. When he finished, the question wasn't whether Veronica should marry him. The question was why it had taken a crisis to bring someone of his caliber back into her company. Alex, she said quietly, I need to ask you something directly. Of course. Forget about the trust requirements. Forget about saving the company. Forget about everything external. Do you want to marry me? Not as a business arrangement, not as a solution to our respective problems, but as a person. The question hung between them, more intimate than anything they'd discussed, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. Alex studied her face for a long moment, seeing past the CEO armor to something more vulnerable underneath. Veronica, 6 hours ago, If someone had asked me to describe the perfect woman, I would have said someone kind, intelligent, devoted to family, and strong enough to handle life's challenges without losing her essential goodness. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his dark eyes. I wouldn't have said billionaire CEO because I thought wealth and power made that kind of goodness impossible. But watching you today, seeing how you fought to preserve something your family built, how you've considered Emma's needs in every part of this conversation, how you've treated me as an equal despite every social convention suggesting otherwise. Well, I think, he said softly, that I could not just marry you but love you. And more importantly, I think Emma could love you too. The admission hit Veronica like a physical force. In 34 years, no one had ever seen her clearly enough to fall in love with the person beneath the power and position. So yes, Alex concluded, if you're asking whether I want to marry you, the answer is yes. Not just as a business arrangement, but as the beginning of something that could become extraordinary. Veronica stood and moved to face him close enough that she had to look up slightly to meet his eyes. Then let's call Harold back in here. We have a wedding to plan and apparently a company to revolutionize. As she reached for her phone to summon the board, Veronica realized that what had started as the worst crisis of her life might actually be the best thing that had ever happened to her. The Pinnacle corporate jet sliced through the night sky, its cabin lights dimmed to create an atmosphere of privacy. Veronica sat by the window watching the scattered lights of small towns pass beneath them like constellations. The decisions of the past 6 hours felt surreal. In less than 24 hours, she would be married to a man she'd only just met. Alex sat across the aisle, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke quietly with his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. Yes, I know it's unexpected, he was saying, his voice carrying the careful patience of someone explaining a complex situation. Emma's medications are in the kitchen cabinet, the blue pill at 8 a.m., the white one with dinner. Her physical therapy exercises are listed on the refrigerator. She needs to do them before bed. He listened for a moment, then smiled slightly. No, Mrs. Rodriguez, I haven't lost my mind. Sometimes the right decision doesn't look sensible from the outside. Emma knows what's happening, and we've discussed it thoroughly. After a few more minutes of detailed instructions about his daughter's care, he ended the call and noticed Veronica watching him. Sorry about that, he said. Emma has a strict routine. Any disruption can set back her progress. You don't need to apologize for taking care of your daughter, Veronica replied, surprising herself with the gentleness in her voice. Alex studied her for a moment. This is going to sound strange, but I need to ask you a question before we go any further. What is it? Are you allergic to dogs? Emma has a service dog, a golden retriever named Edison. He helps with her balance issues and retrieves things when her coordination is affected. Veronica smiled. No allergies. I actually grew up with dogs at our country estate. My father's hunting retrievers. Alex nodded, visibly relieved. That's one potential complication avoided. You'd be surprised how many relationships are derailed by pet incompatibility. The casual reference to relationships hung in the air between them. What they were planning wasn't supposed to be a relationship. It was a business arrangement. Yet something had shifted in the boardroom when he'd answered her question about wanting to marry her as a person. The pilot's voice came over the intercom announcing their descent into Las Vegas. Veronica gathered her thoughts, mentally reviewing the logistics Harold Brennan had arranged. Private chapel, confidential license application, legal witnesses, and the documents required to satisfy the trust requirements. We'll need to meet Emma first thing in the morning, Alex said as they prepared for landing. I won't proceed without her approval. Of course, Veronica agreed. She should be part of this decision. The fact that Alex prioritized his daughter's feelings over the billion-dollar opportunity sitting across from him only increased Veronica's growing respect for him. You should know, he added carefully, Emma can be direct. She doesn't have the filter that most kids develop. The brain injury affected the part of her brain that regulates social interaction. She says exactly what she's thinking, which can be startling if you're not prepared. Veronica appreciated the warning. I prefer directness. Corporate life is filled with people who never say what they actually mean. The jet touched down with barely a bump, a smooth landing that matched the apparent seamlessness of their rapidly evolving plan. But as they deplaned into the warm Nevada night, Veronica sensed that the real turbulence lay ahead. Alex's apartment was located in a modest but well-maintained complex near the Barrow Neurological Institute in Central Phoenix. The buildings were arranged around a central courtyard with a small playground and garden areas. It wasn't luxury living by any definition, but it was clean, safe, and clearly designed with families in mind. Mrs. Rodriguez, a silver-haired woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression, opened the door before they could knock. She looked Alex up and down, then shifted her appraising gaze to Veronica, taking in the designer suit and the unmistakable air of wealth. "So this is her," Mrs. Rodriguez said without preamble. "The CEO who wants to marry you. Veronica Fenro." Veronica extended her hand, recognizing the protective instinct of someone who cared about this family. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Mrs. Rodriguez's handshake was firm. "Emma's waiting in her room. She's been up half the night working on one of her projects. Says she needed to finish it before meeting you." She lowered her voice slightly. "Alex, are you sure about this?" "It's very sudden." "I'm sure, Mrs. Rodriguez," he replied with quiet confidence. "Sometimes the right opportunity doesn't arrive on a convenient schedule." The older woman nodded, apparently satisfied with his certainty, if not the situation itself. "I'll be next door if you need me." Emma took her evening medications on time, and Edison has been walked. As she left, a golden retriever appeared in the hallway, his vest identifying him as a service animal. He approached Alex with a gentle wag, then turned curious eyes toward Veronica. "This is Edison," Alex said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Emma named him after Thomas Edison. She has a thing for famous engineers and inventors." Edison sniffed Veronica's hand, then nudged it gently, apparently approving of her scent. "He's beautiful," she said, stroking his silky head. "Very dignified." "He takes his job seriously," Alex agreed. "He's been with Emma for 3 years now. He can detect when her balance is off before she falls, and he's trained to retrieve her emergency medication if needed." He gestured down the hallway. "Emma's room is this way." The apartment was modest but thoughtfully arranged. Bookshelves filled with engineering texts and science books, walls decorated with framed technical drawings and what looked like Emma's own designs. Veronica noticed small modifications throughout the space. Handrails at key points, color-coded pathways on the floor, furniture arranged to create clear walking paths. Alex knocked lightly on a door decorated with a hand-painted sign reading, "Engineering Department, authorized personnel only." "Emma, we're home. There's someone I'd like you to meet." "Come in," called a young voice. "I'm almost finished calibrating." Emma's bedroom had been transformed into something between a child's sanctuary and a junior engineer's workshop. One wall was covered with bookshelves holding an impressive collection of science books, robotics, magazines, and engineering manuals. A desk in the corner supported what looked like a small-scale model of a ramp system with pulleys and counterweights. The bed was neatly made, decorated with a quilt patterned with famous scientific equations. Emma herself sat in a wheelchair at her desk, though Veronica noticed a walker positioned nearby. She was small for 11, with dark hair like her father's, pulled back in a practical ponytail. When she turned to face them, Veronica saw Alex's intelligent eyes looking back at her from a young face that held both childlike openness and uncommon seriousness. "You must be Veronica Fenro," Emma said, her speech slightly deliberate but clear. "The CEO of Pinnacle Resorts who needs to get married in a hurry." Veronica smiled, appreciating the directness. "That's right, and you must be Emma the engineer I've heard so much about." Emma wheeled herself forward, studying Veronica with undisguised curiosity. "Dad says you run hotels all over the world." 37 properties in 23 countries, Veronica confirmed. "Do any of them have proper wheelchair accessibility?" "Most hotels claim they do, but they don't understand the actual mechanics of mobility challenges." The question was unexpected, but astute. "We meet ADA requirements," Veronica answered honestly, "but I suspect there's room for improvement based on the expertise of someone with first-hand experience." Emma nodded approvingly at the candid response. "Dad explained about your great-grandfather's trust and the marriage requirement. It's an inefficient system for determining corporate control. Ability should matter more than marital status." "I agree," Veronica said, surprising herself with her candor. "But sometimes we have to work within flawed systems while trying to improve them." Emma considered this, then gestured toward her project. "I'm designing an accessibility ramp that uses mechanical advantage principles to require 60% less force to operate. Most hotel accessibility features are designed by people who've never used them." Veronica moved closer to examine the model. The design was ingenious, a system of counterweights and pulleys that would make operating doors and navigational aids much easier for people with limited strength or coordination. "This is impressive," she said, genuinely intrigued. "Have you considered how it would scale to commercial applications?" Emma's eyes lit up at the technical question. The mathematics are sound at any scale. The challenge is materials cost versus long-term maintenance savings. Most businesses choose cheaper installation without calculating operational efficiency. Alex watched this exchange with visible pride. Emma's been designing accessibility improvements since she started physical therapy. Her occupational therapist says she has unique insights because she understands both the engineering principles and the user experience. Edison moved to Emma's side, positioning himself so she could rest her hand on his back for support as she shifted in her wheelchair. The movement looked practiced, a seamless partnership between girl and dog. "Can I ask you something directly?" Emma said, turning her full attention to Veronica. "Of course. Do you actually like my dad, or is he just useful to you?" The bluntness of the question might have been shocking from another child, but coming from Emma, it felt like the natural product of a mind that valued clarity above social niceties. "Emma," Alex began, "that's not—" "No, it's a fair question," Veronica interrupted, appreciating the girl's protective instinct. She considered how to answer with the honesty Emma deserved. "6 hours ago, I didn't know your father existed. But in that time, I've learned that he's intelligent, principled, and puts your welfare above everything else. Those are qualities I respect enormously." She paused, wanting to be absolutely truthful. "I don't know if that's liking in the way you mean, but it's a solid foundation for something that could grow into more." Emma studied her face with unnerving intensity, clearly searching for signs of insincerity. "Dad taught me that real engineering isn't about making something look good. It's about making it work right. Same with people. Are you real or just for show?" Alex winced slightly. "Emma, that's enough. Veronica isn't on trial here." But Veronica found herself smiling at the question. "It's a valid concern. The business world is full of people who are just for show. I'd like to think I'm real, Emma, but you'll have to form your own judgment based on my actions, not my words." Emma nodded slowly, apparently satisfied with this answer. "If you marry my dad, what happens to me? Where will we live? Will I have to change schools? Edison needs a yard to run in." The practical questions revealed the real anxieties beneath Emma's confident exterior. This wasn't just about a business arrangement between adults. It was about the fundamental stability of her life. "Those are important questions," Veronica acknowledged. "If your father and I marry, both of you would move into my apartment initially. It has more space, security, and is actually closer to your school and the Barrow Institute." She continued, addressing each concern methodically. "You wouldn't need to change schools unless you wanted to. As for Edison, my building has a private rooftop garden that would be perfect for him, and there's a park across the street." Emma considered this information with the seriousness of someone evaluating structural specifications. "What about my medical appointments? Dad has to take me to physical therapy 3 times a week, speech therapy on Tuesdays, and cognitive assessment every month. I have a private driver who would be available to both of you," Veronica explained, "and my assistant could help coordinate scheduling to make sure nothing is missed." "What about Dad's engineering work? He's really good at it, you know. He just had to stop because of me." The statement carried a weight of guilt that no 11-year-old should have to bear. Veronica's heart ached at the responsibility Emma felt for her father's career sacrifice. "Actually," Veronica said carefully, "part of our arrangement would involve your father returning to engineering work at Pinnacle. His expertise would be incredibly valuable to the company." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? He could be an engineer again?" "He never stopped being an engineer," Veronica corrected gently. "He just put that work aside temporarily to be your father. Now he might have an opportunity to do both." For the first time, Emma smiled, a transformation that lit her serious face with childlike joy. "He misses it, you know. Sometimes I find him reading engineering journals at night when he thinks I'm asleep." Alex looked surprised and a little embarrassed by this revelation. "There's one more thing," Emma said, her expression growing serious again. "If you're going to be my stepmom, you should know about Dad's bad days." "Emma," Alex's voice carried a warning, "that's not necessary." It is, she insisted with the certainty only children possess. She needs to know everything if she's going to be family. She turned back to Veronica. Sometimes Dad has nightmares about Afghanistan and Mom's accident. He calls them system malfunctions, but the doctors called it PTSD. He gets really quiet and needs to be alone in his workshop. It doesn't happen much anymore, but it might if he gets stressed about this marriage stuff. The matter-of-fact way she described her father's trauma spoke volumes about the relationship between them. No secrets, no shame, just honest recognition of the challenges they faced together. Veronica looked at Alex, seeing the discomfort in his expression, but also the pride in having raised a daughter who understood that vulnerability wasn't weakness. "Thank you for telling me, Emma," she said quietly. "That's important information that helps me understand your father better." Alex cleared his throat, clearly wanting to move the conversation forward. "Emma, Veronica and I need to make a decision tonight. We're planning to fly to Las Vegas in the morning for a small ceremony that would satisfy the trust requirements. But we won't proceed without your approval." Emma sat straighter in her wheelchair, clearly recognizing the significance of being given a voice in this decision. "Would I be there at the wedding?" "Of course," Veronica answered immediately. "You're the most important person in your father's life. You should be part of this." Emma was quiet for a long moment, her young face showing the concentration of someone working through a complex equation. "I think you should marry him," she finally declared. "Dad needs someone smart enough to understand what he's talking about, and you need someone who isn't after your money. Plus, your hotels need better accessibility features, and I have lots of ideas about that." The practical assessment made both adults smile. "Is that a yes?" Alex asked. Emma nodded decisively. "It's a conditional yes. You have to promise to be honest with each other, even about the hard stuff. That's how good systems work, with clear communication protocols." "I promise," Veronica said, strangely moved by the child's wisdom. "Me too," Alex agreed. "Good," Emma said with finality. "Now can I show you my designs for a better hotel bathroom? The ones in most hotels are terrible for people with mobility issues." The private chapel at the Bellagio had been secured through Harold Brennan's connections, a small, elegant space that could be closed to the public without attracting attention. The staff had been selected for their discretion with confidentiality agreements, ensuring that news of the ceremony wouldn't leak until Veronica and Alex were ready to announce it. Emma sat in the front row wearing a simple blue dress that complemented her dark hair. Edison lay at her feet, his service vest exchanged for a blue bow tie that matched Emma's dress. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside her, still looking skeptical about the entire arrangement, but determined to support the child she'd come to care for deeply. Alex stood at the altar in a charcoal suit that Brennan's assistant had somehow acquired in his exact measurements overnight. He looked transformed from the maintenance worker Veronica had met yesterday, the suit emphasizing his military posture and natural dignity. Veronica wore an ivory silk dress, simple and elegant, rather than traditionally bridal. She'd rejected the idea of pretending this was a conventional wedding, opting instead for something that honored the unique circumstances that had brought them together. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m., but at 8:30, as Veronica was preparing in a private suite, her phone began buzzing with urgent messages. The first was from Harold Brennan, his normally composed voice tight with stress. "Veronica, we have a problem. The story's leaked. Every major business publication is running headlines about your emergency marriage to a janitor. The stock is already down 8% in pre-market trading." She moved to the window, pressing the phone tightly to her ear. "How did they find out we were completely discreet?" "Someone from the board or legal team must have talked. The details are too accurate to be speculation. They know about the trust requirements, the deadline, everything." The second call came from Jonathan Mills, her father's estate attorney, a man she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, but who still wielded considerable influence over family matters. "Veronica," his smooth, dangerous voice practically oozed through the phone, "I represent certain family interests that are deeply concerned about your impulsive decision-making. There are parties prepared to challenge this marriage as fraudulent, designed solely to circumvent the trust requirements rather than reflect genuine matrimonial intent." The legal threat was both vague and terrifying. If anyone could prove the marriage was purely strategic, it might not satisfy the trust conditions, leaving Pinnacle vulnerable regardless of the ceremony. Furthermore, Mills continued, "There are questions about Mr. Thornwell's background that might interest the media. His military discharge wasn't entirely voluntary. There were concerns about his psychological fitness following his wife's death and his daughter's injury. Veronica felt ice form in her stomach. What are you implying? I'm implying that a man who left a promising military career due to mental health concerns might not be the stable partner your shareholders expect. The narrative writes itself: desperate CEO marries unstable janitor to preserve family fortune. The attack was brilliant in its cruelty, taking Alex's greatest strength, his devotion to Emma, and reframing it as psychological weakness. Worse, it threatened to subject Emma to public scrutiny about her father's mental state during her recovery. When Veronica returned to the main chapel area, Alex was already there reading the morning's headlines on his phone. His expression was grim, but unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting this kind of attack. "How bad is it?" Veronica asked, though she already knew from his posture. "Bad enough. They're portraying you as either desperate or delusional. Me as an opportunist taking advantage of your crisis." He set down the phone carefully, but the worst part is what this means for Emma. They're going to dig into her medical history, our family circumstances, everything private we've tried to protect. Emma appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the wedding, but her expression showed she'd overheard enough to understand the situation. "Are you calling it off?" she asked directly, her voice small but steady. The question hung in the air between them. Veronica realized this was the moment of choice: safety versus authenticity, protecting reputation versus protecting the relationship they'd begun building. Alex moved to his daughter, kneeling to her eye level despite his formal suit. "Emma, this might get very difficult. Media attention, people saying things about our family that aren't true or aren't fair. Are you strong enough to handle that?" Emma's smile was fierce. "Dad, I've handled brain surgery, learning to walk again, and kids at school who thought I was stupid because I talked funny. I think I can handle some journalists." She looked at Veronica with the same direct gaze that had evaluated her the night before. "The question isn't whether I'm strong enough. The question is whether you're brave enough to choose us over what other people think." The challenge was clear, delivered with 11-year-old honesty that cut through every adult complication. Veronica looked at Alex, seeing in his eyes the same question Emma had asked. Was she willing to fight for something real, or would she retreat to the safety of conventional expectations? "We're getting married," Veronica said firmly, her voice carrying the authority that had built a business empire. "And then we're going home to show everyone exactly what they underestimated." The ceremony proceeded with simplified elegance. The legal requirements were met with precise efficiency: signatures, witnesses, the necessary documentation to satisfy the trust conditions. But when it came time for vows, Veronica set aside the generic text the officiant had prepared. "Alex," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. "24 hours ago, we were strangers. Today, we're making promises that most people spend years preparing for. Our circumstances are unusual, but my commitment is genuine." She took a breath, aware that these words would likely be scrutinized by lawyers looking for evidence of fraudulent intent. "I promise to respect your intelligence, honor your dedication to Emma, and appreciate the integrity that guides your choices. I promise to build something with you that serves both our interests while creating space for something more meaningful to develop." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Most importantly, I promise to remember that beneath titles and circumstances, we're two people choosing to face challenges together rather than alone. Whatever comes next, we'll meet it as partners." Alex's eyes reflected surprise and something deeper: recognition that she'd moved beyond strategy into genuine commitment. When his turn came, his response was equally authentic. "Veronica, I've spent years rebuilding systems that were damaged by forces beyond my control. I know that the strongest repairs come not from replacing what was lost, but from creating something new that honors the original design while incorporating lessons learned through hardship." He took her hands in his engineer's fingers steady and warm. "I promise to bring that same approach to our marriage, respecting your independence, supporting your vision, and working beside you to build something stronger than either of us could create alone." He glanced at Emma, including her in his promises. "I pledge to balance my responsibilities as your husband with my commitment to my daughter, believing that the best family systems don't require choosing between obligations but finding ways to honor all connections." As rings were exchanged, simple bands chosen for practicality rather than show, Veronica caught Emma wiping away tears while pretending to adjust her glasses. The girl who had faced brain surgery with determination was moved by seeing her father step toward a new future. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the small gathering applauded softly. There was no dramatic kiss, just a gentle embrace that acknowledged the unusual nature of their union while honoring the genuine connection developing between them. As they signed the final documentation, Jonathan Mills appeared at the chapel entrance, legal briefcase in hand, and two associates flanking him like legal bodyguards. Mrs. Fenrow Thornwell, he said, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone delivering an unpleasant message. I have papers here challenging the validity of this marriage on behalf of interested parties. The Fenrow Foundation Board believes this union fails to satisfy the genuine intent requirements of the trust. Veronica straightened to her full height, still holding Alex's hand. The marriage is legal, the documentation is complete, and the trust conditions have been met. Your challenge is noted and will be handled by our legal team. Mills smiled thinly. The court of public opinion may rule before legal proceedings conclude. I wonder how your shareholders will respond to the spectacle of their CEO marrying a janitor with documented psychological issues. Before either adult could respond, Emma wheeled herself forward, Edison at her side. My dad was a captain in the Army Corps of Engineers, she said, her voice clear despite a slight tremor. He designed systems that save soldiers' lives. The only reason he's a janitor is because I got hurt and he chose me over his career. She stared at Mills with the unfiltered intensity only children can manage. If you try to make him sound crazy for putting his daughter first, you're the one with psychological issues. Mills looked taken aback, clearly unprepared to face a child's straightforward defense. His momentary discomfort gave Veronica the opening she needed. Mr. Mills, you've delivered your message. Now I suggest you leave before I have security escort you out. Any further communication should go through proper legal channels. As Mills and his associates retreated, Veronica knelt beside Emma's wheelchair. That was incredibly brave. Thank you for defending your father. Emma shrugged, though pride showed clearly in her eyes. Engineers have to stand up for their work. Dad's best project is our family. The flight back to Phoenix carried none of the nervous energy of their journey to Las Vegas. Instead, a different tension filled the cabin, the weight of knowing they were flying into a storm of media attention and corporate politics. Veronica spent much of the flight on conference calls with Harold Brennan and the PR team, developing a strategy to address the inevitable questions about her sudden marriage. Alex sat with Emma, reviewing her medications and therapy schedule for the coming week, making notes about how to minimize disruption to her routine despite their changing circumstances. When Veronica finally ended her calls, she found Emma asleep, her head resting against her father's shoulder. Alex was watching his daughter with an expression of such tender protectiveness that Veronica felt like an intruder witnessing something sacred. She pushed herself too hard today, he said quietly. Emotional stress affects her physically. She'll need extra rest when we get home. The word home hung between them, a concept now in transition. Where was home? Veronica's penthouse, Alex's apartment, some new space they might create together. About that, Veronica said, keeping her voice low to avoid waking Emma. I think you and Emma should move into my penthouse initially. It's secure, private, and large enough that we can all have personal space while adjusting. Alex nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense for now, but we should consider Emma's needs carefully. Too much change too quickly could set back her progress. Of course, Veronica agreed. We'll move at whatever pace works for her. Maybe bring some of her furniture, keep her surroundings as familiar as possible. She hesitated before asking her next question. Mills mentioned your military discharge. He implied there were concerns. Alex was quiet for a long moment, his hand gently stroking Emma's hair as she slept. When he spoke, his voice carried the careful precision of someone navigating dangerous terrain. After Sarah died and Emma was injured, I had what the military calls an adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood. Civilians would call it PTSD combined with grief. I wasn't sleeping. I was hypervigilant about Emma's condition. The military psychologist recommended I transition to civilian life for both my sake and Emma's. He met Veronica's eyes directly. It wasn't a dishonorable discharge. It was medical retirement with full benefits. But yes, there were psychological evaluations, mandatory counseling sessions, medication for a while. It's all in my records, which means the media can find it if they dig deep enough. The honest vulnerability of his admission touched Veronica deeply. Thank you for telling me. Emma was right. You needed to know. Partnerships don't work without full disclosure of potential weaknesses. The engineer's practical approach to emotional matters was oddly comforting. Alex didn't hide his struggles or exaggerate them. He simply presented them as components of a complex system that required proper management. Does it still affect you? She asked gently. Sometimes. Certain sounds can trigger flashbacks, car horns, that sound like alarms, sudden loud noises. I occasionally have nightmares about the hospital, about not reaching Emma in time. He spoke without self-pity, simply stating facts. But I've learned management techniques. Regular exercise helps. Focusing on concrete tasks, building things, fixing mechanical problems. And Emma is my anchor. Caring for her gives me purpose that keeps the darkness at bay. Veronica felt a new respect bloom alongside her growing affection for this man. The strength required to face one's demons while raising a special needs child alone was far greater than any corporate battle she'd ever fought. If it happens, a flashback or nightmare, what should I do? The question clearly surprised him, as if he hadn't expected her to care enough to ask. Just give me space then presence without pressure. Don't ask questions immediately. Wait until I signal that I'm ready to talk. Emma knows the protocol. She'll guide you if needed. The matter-of-fact way he included Emma in his coping strategy spoke volumes about their relationship. They were a team, each supporting the other through their respective challenges. Anything else I should know? Veronica asked. Alex considered this seriously. I sleep lightly, military habit combined with being attuned to Emma's needs. I often get up early to exercise before she wakes. And I need time alone occasionally to process things, preferably with something mechanical to work on. I have a workshop space in the building's service level, Veronica offered. It's used for maintenance staff, but I can arrange for you to have private access. The gratitude in his eyes was immediate. That would be extremely helpful. Thank you. As the jet began its descent into Phoenix, Emma stirred awake, blinking drowsily. Are we home yet? Almost, Alex replied. We'll be landing soon. Good, Emma mumbled, still half asleep. Edison needs his dinner, and I want to show Veronica my designs for hotel bathrooms. Her easy inclusion of Veronica in their evening routine touched something deep in Veronica's heart, a place that had been empty for longer than she cared to admit. I'm looking forward to seeing them, she said, meaning it completely. The Pinnacle corporate headquarters buzzed with barely contained curiosity as Veronica strode through the main lobby the following Monday morning. Alex walked beside her now, dressed in a tailored suit that emphasized his military bearing rather than concealing it. The transformation from maintenance supervisor to executive spouse was striking, not because the suit made him more impressive, but because it simply revealed the man who had always been there beneath the uniform. Whispers followed them to the executive elevator, employees poorly disguising their shock at seeing the night janitor now walking alongside their CEO as her husband. Security guards who had previously nodded respectfully to Alex now seemed uncertain how to address him. Was he still staff A visitor, something else entirely? Alex handled the attention with the same quiet dignity he'd shown in the boardroom days earlier. He nodded to familiar faces, exchanged brief greetings with maintenance staff he'd supervised, and generally acted as if his dramatic change in status was the most natural development in the world. The executive floor presented different challenges. Here, curious glances were replaced by carefully blank expressions, masking calculated assessments. Division heads and department directors studied Alex with the predatory focus of wolves evaluating a newcomer to the pack. Harold Brennan met them outside the boardroom, his expression a mixture of concern and relief. Veronica, Alex, good morning. The board is assembled and waiting. Any last-minute developments I should know about? Veronica asked quietly as they paused outside the boardroom doors. Stocks down 12% from Thursday. The business press is having a field day with speculation about your whirlwind romance. Several major shareholders have called expressing concerns about company stability. Brennan lowered his voice further. The Fenro Foundation filed initial papers questioning the validity of the marriage. Nothing that will hold up legally, but enough to create uncertainty in the market. Alex listened to this assessment without visible reaction, but Veronica noticed his shoulders tense slightly, the only outward sign that the pressure was affecting him. "And the board," she asked. "Divided. Some see this as brilliant crisis management. Others are questioning your judgment. All are curious about your new husband's actual role in the company." Veronica nodded mentally, preparing for battle. "Then let's not keep them waiting." The boardroom fell silent as they entered, 12 executives frozen in the act of pretending they hadn't been discussing the very people now walking through the door. Veronica took her usual seat at the head of the table. Alex sat in a chair positioned slightly to the side present, but not presuming to take a voting member's place. "Good morning." Veronica began, her voice carrying the practiced authority that had served her through countless crises. "I recognize that recent events have raised questions about Pinnacle's leadership and stability. Let me address those directly before we move to regular business." She gestured to Alex. "As most of you know, I married Alexander Thornwell on Saturday, satisfying the requirements of the Fenro Family Trust and securing controlling interest in Pinnacle Luxury Resorts. What the press doesn't yet know, and what I'm sharing with you now, is that Alex is not merely a maintenance supervisor, but a former Army Corps of Engineers captain with a mechanical engineering degree who has previously consulted for Pinnacle through Morrison Technical Solutions." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the room as executives processed this revelation. Under the name Alexander Mitchell, he designed infrastructure improvements for 12 Pinnacle properties over the past 3 years, generating millions in operational savings. His expertise in systems optimization and efficiency improvements represents a significant asset to this company. Margaret Sterling, the CFO, who had been present for the initial boardroom encounter, looked thoughtful rather than shocked. "Morrison Technical, that explains why some of those system designs look familiar. I remember reviewing those projects. They consistently came in under budget with better than projected results." Veronica nodded. "Exactly. And now we have an opportunity to bring that expertise in-house. Alex has prepared a comprehensive proposal for operational efficiencies that could save Pinnacle approximately $12 million annually. I've distributed copies to each of you for review." As board members opened the folders placed before them containing Alex's detailed analysis, David Lawrence, head of international development and a recent addition to the board, gave a dismissive snort. "With all due respect, Veronica, this feels like justification after the fact. Are we really supposed to believe it's just coincidence that your emergency husband happens to be a secret engineering genius who can save the company millions?" The challenge was blunt, carrying the aggression of someone testing boundaries. Before Veronica could respond, Alex spoke, his voice calm, but carrying the natural authority of his military background. "It's not coincidence, Mr. Lawrence. It's pattern recognition. When Veronica needed someone she could trust during a crisis, she instinctively recognized qualities in me that resonated with her values. Reliability, practical problem solving, commitment to long-term stability. Those same qualities inform my engineering approach and my personal choices." He opened his copy of the report, turning to a specific page. "If you'll examine Section 3, you'll see that most of these efficiency recommendations don't require expensive technology, upgrades, or consultant fees. They're practical mechanical adjustments to existing systems. The corporate equivalent of recognizing that sometimes the right solution is simpler than the complex ones everyone's been pursuing." Lawrence wasn't ready to concede. "And we're supposed to take operational advice from someone who was emptying our trash cans last week." Alex met his gaze without flinching. "I've built systems that kept people alive in war zones when failure meant death. Trust me, I understand consequences better than someone who's only risked money." The blunt assessment silenced Lawrence momentarily, but Janet Walsh from marketing seized the opening. "The optics of this situation are challenging regardless of Mr. Thornwell's qualifications. The press is portraying this as either a desperate move by a CEO in crisis or a calculated evasion of trust requirements. Neither narrative instills confidence in our leadership." Veronica had anticipated this concern. "The press narratives are based on incomplete information. Once Alex's background and expertise are made public, the story transforms from desperate CEO marries janitor to visionary leader recognizes overlooked talent. It's not about changing facts. It's about completing the picture." For the next hour, the board meeting continued with a tense but productive discussion of how to manage both the legal challenges from the Fenro Foundation and the public relations aspects of Veronica's sudden marriage. Throughout, Alex contributed thoughtful insights without overstepping, offering technical explanations when asked, but generally deferring to Veronica on matters of corporate strategy. The dynamic was working, Veronica thought, with cautious optimism. They were establishing themselves as a complementary team, her business acumen paired with his practical expertise. Then Gregory Winters, the board's senior technical advisor, began questioning Alex about specific details of his efficiency proposals. The questions started professionally enough but grew increasingly aggressive and technical, clearly designed to expose any gaps in Alex's knowledge. These load calculations for the Desert Palace HVAC systems, they seem optimistic. What assumptions are you making about peak capacity during summer convention season? Alex responded with precise technical details, clearly comfortable with the subject matter. But as Winters continued his interrogation, his questions became more rapid-fire, his tone more dismissive, creating an atmosphere reminiscent of hostile cross-examination. And your projections for emergency generator requirements during monsoon season power fluctuations, they're significantly lower than industry standards. Are you suggesting our current engineers have been over-provisioning for years? That you somehow know better than dedicated professionals who've been managing these systems while you've been mopping floors? The deliberate insult landed like a slap. Veronica saw Alex's hand tighten around his pen, the only outward sign of tension as his breathing pattern changed subtly. The industry standards include significant redundancies. Alex explained, his voice now measured in a way that suggested careful control. My calculations factor in smart load distribution that allows for smaller generator capacity while maintaining critical systems. It's an approach I developed in Afghanistan where resource limitations required innovative solutions. Winters pressed harder. And if you're wrong, if your battlefield improvisation fails in a luxury hotel filled with guests paying $1,000 a night, who bears responsibility? Then the maintenance worker playing engineer. Something shifted in Alex's expression, a momentary distance in his eyes, a tightness around his mouth. Veronica recognized the signs from his description on the plane. The aggressive questioning combined with the references to Afghanistan were triggering associations with high-pressure military situations. Before she could intervene, Alex set down his pen with deliberate care and took a slow, measured breath. "Mr. Winters," he said quietly, "I need a moment." The simple statement silenced the room. Alex continued his honesty, disarming the tension. "What you're seeing is what my doctors would call a mild stress response. Some people call it PTSD. It happens sometimes when certain patterns of questioning remind me of combat situations or the hospital after my wife's death." His candor was stunning, not admitting weakness but acknowledging reality with the same precision he'd applied to technical questions. "Yes, I've got some wiring that needs maintenance from time to time. War and loss will do that. But my training taught me that acknowledging a structural weakness is the first step to reinforcing it." He took another measured breath, visibly regaining his equilibrium. "To answer your question directly, my calculations include 3 layers of redundancy, not the industry standard 5, because I've determined the additional 2 layers provide negligible security at significant cost. I stand by those assessments and accept full responsibility for their implementation." The boardroom remained silent, executives uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented moment of human vulnerability in a setting usually reserved for polished corporate performances. Veronica rose from her chair, moving to stand beside Alex, a deliberate show of solidarity. "My husband's engineering recommendations have already saved this company millions through his previous consulting and work. His approach combines technical expertise with practical experience that most consultants lack. And his honesty about his own challenges demonstrates precisely the kind of integrity that defines Pinnacle's leadership." She turned to face Winters directly. "Your technical questions are valid, Gregory. Your attempt to provoke an emotional response through personal attacks is not. In this room, we evaluate ideas based on merit, not delivery method." The rest of the meeting proceeded with a markedly different tone, still professional, but with the artificial corporate veneer stripped away. By the time they adjourned, the board had approved a pilot implementation of Alex's efficiency recommendations at the Desert Palace with full evaluation to follow before company-wide adoption. As executives filed out, several nodded respectfully to Alex's acknowledgement, if not yet acceptance. Harold Brennan lingered waiting until the room had cleared before approaching. That was unexpected, he said, looking at Alex with new consideration. Most men would have either lost their temper or retreated from that kind of attack. Your response was remarkable. Alex shook his head slightly. Not remarkable, just honest. In the military, we learned that acknowledging limitations was safer than hiding them. Hidden weaknesses get people killed. Recognized ones can be compensated for. Brennan nodded thoughtfully. If you don't mind my saying so, that approach might benefit our corporate culture as well. There's too much energy wasted maintaining facades of perfection. As they left the boardroom, Veronica felt a surge of pride in the man beside her. In a single meeting, he'd established himself not as an appendage to her position, but as a valuable contributor with his own unique perspective. More impressively, he'd transformed a potential weakness into a moment of authentic leadership. You were magnificent in there, she said quietly as they walked toward her office. Alex looked surprised by the compliment. I had a stress response in the middle of a board meeting. That's hardly magnificent. You showed them something they rarely see, genuine human honesty in a setting designed to reward performative confidence. Trust me, that made more of an impression than any technical expertise could have. He considered this. In engineering, we have a saying, sometimes the most important part of a structure is where it's designed to bend rather than break. Maybe the same is true for people. As they reached her office, Veronica made a decision. I need to handle some calls, but then I'd like to take you to lunch, not as CEO and engineer, but as wife and husband, trying to get to know each other under very unusual circumstances. Alex's smile transformed his serious face. I'd like that, but first I need to call Emma's school to check on her morning progress. New environments can be challenging for her. The simple statement reminded Veronica that beyond corporate politics and trust requirements, they were building something more complex and precious, a family unit centered around a remarkable child who deserved all the stability they could provide. Take all the time you need, she said. Emma comes first. Always. The genuine appreciation in Alex's eyes told her she'd passed an important test. For all his technical brilliance and military discipline, his heart belonged first and foremost to his daughter. Respecting that priority wasn't just the right thing to do. It was the foundation upon which any genuine partnership between them would need to be built. Moving day arrived with military precision thanks to Alex's careful planning. 3 weeks after the wedding, a small moving truck pulled up to Veronica's luxury high-rise, containing only the essentials from the Thornwell apartment: Emma's bedroom furniture, her medical equipment, a workshop's worth of tools, and Edison's bed and supplies. Alex had insisted on leaving most of their other possessions in storage. We should integrate gradually, he'd explained. Too much change at once could overwhelm all of us. Veronica's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of Phoenix's most prestigious residential building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city and distant mountains. The interior was elegantly minimalist. Italian furniture, contemporary art, and a kitchen that looked more like a design showpiece than a functional space. As Emma wheeled herself through the main living area, her expression was a mixture of awe and apprehension. Edison stayed close beside her, sensing her anxiety. It's very white, she observed, running her hand along a pristine sofa. Do you actually live here, or is it a hotel room? Veronica smiled at the girl's directness. It probably does look more like a hotel suite than a home. I've never spent much time here, mostly just to sleep between workdays. Where will my therapy equipment go? Emma asked practically. My balance bars need wall mounting, and my coordination station needs at least 6 feet of clear space. Alex had already considered this. The home office can be converted into a therapy room. It has the right dimensions in good natural light. That works perfectly, Veronica agreed. I rarely use it anyway. I mostly work at the office or in the living room. Emma wheeled herself down the hallway, exploring with the methodical attention of someone mapping unfamiliar territory. She paused at a set of double doors. Is this your bedroom? Yes, but there's a guest suite at the other end of the apartment that will be your father's room for now. Veronica had been careful to establish appropriate boundaries from the beginning. Their marriage might be legal, but their relationship was still developing. Separate bedrooms felt like the respectful approach. Alex appeared in the hallway carrying a toolbox. I've checked the bathroom accessibility. We'll need to install grab bars and adjust the shower setup, but the doorways are wide enough for the wheelchair on days when Emma needs it. Whatever modifications are necessary, just make them, Veronica said. This is your home now, too. The words felt strange but right. After 9 years of living alone in this immaculate space, the prospect of sharing it, of transforming it into a true home, was both terrifying and somehow exhilarating. Within hours, the stark penthouse began to change. Emma's room filled with her books, science posters, and the special equipment that supported her independence. The home office transformed into a therapy space with balance bars, coordination tools, and the medical supplies that managed her condition. The pristine kitchen collected colorful magnetic reminder notes about medications, schedules, and therapy appointments. Most striking was Alex's quiet efficiency as he moved through the space making small but significant modifications. Installing grab bars in bathrooms, adjusting furniture heights for Emma's accessibility, setting up a modest workshop area on the service balcony where he could maintain her equipment. By evening, Edison had claimed a sunny spot near the windows. Emma's favorite books filled a previously empty bookshelf, and family photos appeared on walls that had held only abstract art. The penthouse felt fundamentally different, less like a magazine feature and more like a place where people actually lived. As they ate dinner together at the dining table, a simple meal Alex had prepared, while Veronica helped Emma organize her school materials, Veronica realized this was the first time in years she'd eaten at this table, rather than at her desk or on the sofa while working. "Is the food okay?" Alex asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I kept it simple tonight, since we're all tired from moving." "It's perfect," Veronica replied honestly. "I just realized I can't remember the last time I had a proper family dinner." Emma looked up from carefully cutting her chicken. "We always eat together at the table. Dad says meals are for talking, not for screens or work." "A rule I fully support," Veronica said, setting her phone face down beside her plate. "So what should we talk about?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Can I show you my designs for hotel bathrooms tomorrow? I've been thinking about how to make them better for people like me without making them look like hospital rooms." "I'd love to see them," Veronica said. "In fact, I've been considering an accessibility initiative across all Pinnacle properties. Your insights would be invaluable." "Really?" Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "Could we actually build them like in real hotels?" "If they're as good as I suspect they are, absolutely. We could start with a pilot program at the Desert Palace." Alex watched this exchange with visible pride. Emma's been designing accessibility improvements since she started therapy. Her occupational therapist says she has unique insights because she understands both the technical principles and the user experience. "The best engineering comes from solving problems you've experienced personally," Emma explained with 11-year-old wisdom. "That's why Dad was so good at military engineering. He actually lived in the places he was designing for." As the conversation continued touching on school projects, therapy progress, and potential improvements to the penthouse, Veronica felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. A warmth that might have been contentment or perhaps the first tendrils of belonging. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Veronica found Alex on the balcony looking out at the city lights. He'd changed from his moving clothes into worn jeans and a simple t-shirt that emphasized his military physique without seeming deliberate about it. "She seems to be adjusting well," Veronica said, joining him at the railing. "For now," Alex nodded. "Emma's resilient, but change takes time to process. There might be rough days ahead when the novelty wears off and she misses familiar routines. What can I do to help when that happens?" Alex looked surprised by the question, as if he wasn't accustomed to someone offering support rather than expecting it from him. "Consistency helps," he said after a moment. "Regular schedules, predictable responses, and space when she needs it. Sometimes her brain gets overwhelmed processing new information, and she needs quiet time to sort things out." "Like father, like daughter," Veronica observed with a slight smile. He acknowledged this with a nod. "We're similar that way. Military life teaches you to adapt quickly to new environments, but even soldiers need downtime to recalibrate." They stood in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the distant headlights trace patterns along the streets below. "Thank you," Veronica said finally, "for bringing life into this space. I never realized how empty it was until today. It's a beautiful apartment. It was a beautiful shell, she corrected. Now it might actually become a home. Alex turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. Veronica, I want to make something clear. I know our arrangement began as a business necessity, but I meant what I said in those wedding vows. I'm committed to building something real here, not just for Emma's security or your company, but for all three of us. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside her, a place that had been walled off since watching her parents' marriage disintegrate. I want that too, she admitted quietly. I just don't know if I remember how to build anything but a business. Fortunately, he said with a smile that transformed his serious face, you married an engineer who specializes in building solid foundations. For 6 weeks, their unusual family unit found a tentative rhythm. Alex integrated into Pinnacle's operations, bringing his engineering expertise to infrastructure projects while carefully avoiding any appearance of overstepping his role. Veronica adjusted to coming home at reasonable hours, participating in family dinners, and learning the complex schedule of Emma's medical care. Emma's school reported steady progress in both academics and socialization. The press coverage gradually shifted from scandal to cautious interest as Alex's military and engineering background became public knowledge. Financial analysts upgraded Pinnacle's status as the implementation of Alex's efficiency measures showed promising early results. Then came the day everything faltered. Veronica was in the middle of a crucial investor meeting when her assistant slipped into the room with an urgent note. Emma's school called. Medical emergency. Alex is in Pittsburgh at the system inspection. Emma taken to Phoenix Children's Hospital. The blood drained from Veronica's face. Without hesitation, she stood, apologized to the investors, and handed the presentation over to Margaret Sterling. Within minutes, she was in her car directing her driver to the hospital while trying to reach Alex. I'm already on a plane back. His voice came through the car's speaker, tight with controlled fear. The school says she had a seizure during PE class. It hasn't happened in over a year. I'm 5 minutes from the hospital, Veronica assured him. I'll be with her until you arrive. Veronica, his voice caught. She'll be scared. The seizures disorient her, and she wakes up confused. She needs... I know, Veronica said softly. I'll stay right with her. She won't be alone for a moment. The emergency room was organized chaos. Veronica identified herself as Emma's stepmother, relieved that the legal marriage gave her unquestioned access. A nurse led her to a curtained area where Emma lay on a bed, pale and groggy, an IV in her arm, and monitoring equipment tracking her vital signs. Emma, Veronica said gently, taking the girl's hand. It's Veronica. I'm here. Emma's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding her normally sharp gaze. Dad, she mumbled. He's on his way, Veronica assured her. I'll stay until he gets here. Edison, Emma's concern for her service dog, even in her disoriented state, spoke volumes about their bond. The school is taking care of him. He's fine. Emma's hand tightened around Veronica's. Don't leave. I won't, Veronica promised, settling into the chair beside the bed. I'm right here. For the next 3 hours, Veronica remained at Emma's side while doctors ran tests, reviewed her medical history, and monitored her recovery. She answered questions about Emma's medications therapy regimen and recent activities with the detailed knowledge she'd acquired from listening to Alex and studying Emma's medical binders. When the neurologist arrived to discuss preliminary findings, Veronica found herself advocating with the fierce protection of a parent rather than the polite interest of a stepmother. Emma's been seizure-free for 14 months, she explained to the doctor. This regression coincides with significant life changes, moving to a new home, adjusting to a blended family situation. Could stress be a trigger factor? The doctor looked impressed by her insight. Absolutely. Traumatic brain injury recovery isn't linear. Stress, sleep disruption, or routine changes can definitely trigger regression. We'll do an EEG to check for any changes in brain activity, but my initial assessment suggests this is likely an adjustment response rather than deterioration of her condition. When Alex finally arrived, rushing into the emergency room with the barely controlled panic of a father who'd been too far away when his child needed him, he found Veronica sitting beside Emma's bed, reading aloud from a science magazine she'd bought in the hospital gift shop. Dad? Emma's face lit up, her earlier confusion replaced by relief. Alex embraced his daughter carefully, mindful of the IV lines, then looked at Veronica with such naked gratitude it made her throat tighten. You stayed, he said simply. Of course I stayed. Veronica replied, surprised he would think otherwise. She needed me. Later, after Emma had been admitted for overnight observation and fallen asleep, Alex and Veronica sat in the uncomfortable hospital chairs beside her bed, speaking in the hushed tones of parents watching over a sleeping child. The neurologist thinks it's stress-related, Veronica explained. Too many changes too quickly. Alex nodded, guilt shadowing his features. I should have anticipated this. Moving new school routines, the media attention. It's a lot for anyone to process, let alone someone with Emma's challenges. This isn't your fault, Veronica said firmly. We all wanted this arrangement to work seamlessly, but life doesn't follow business plans. I was thinking, Alex said hesitantly, maybe we should move back to the apartment for a while. Return to familiar surroundings until Emma stabilizes. Veronica felt an unexpected pang at the suggestion. The thought of them leaving the penthouse, of returning to her solitary existence after experiencing family life, was surprisingly painful. Or, she offered carefully, we could modify our approach. Keep the family together but simplify Emma's schedule. I could work from home more often, create more consistency in her daily routine. Alex studied her face. You do that, adjust your CEO schedule around Emma's needs. She's more important than any meeting, Veronica said, the truth of it surprising even herself. Companies can wait, children can't. The simple statement hung between them, representing a fundamental shift in Veronica's priorities that would have seemed impossible 6 weeks earlier. There's something else, Alex said quietly. The Fenro Foundation filed new legal papers today. They're claiming our marriage doesn't satisfy the trust because we maintain separate bedrooms and finances. They're arguing it's a marriage in name only, designed to circumvent the trust requirements. Veronica had been expecting something like this. Harold called me about it just before Emma's emergency. Their legal position is weak, but they're hoping to create enough uncertainty to affect stock prices and force a settlement. What do? We fight, Veronica said simply. And we continue building this family in whatever way works for us, regardless of external expectations. Alex reached across Emma's hospital bed to take Veronica's hand. The gesture was spontaneous but felt entirely natural. Two parents united in protecting their child. When I was in the Army, he said quietly, we had a saying, the most important factor in mission success isn't equipment or strategy, but knowing the people beside you will never leave you behind. Today you proved that to Emma and to me. The simple statement of trust meant more to Veronica than any corporate accolade she'd ever received. I'm beginning to understand what my great-grandparents discovered, she said, thinking of the portrait of Theodore and Eleanor Fenro. That real partnerships aren't built on legal documents or social expectations, but on showing up when it matters most. The courtroom was smaller than Veronica had expected, an intimate setting for a battle that would determine both Pinnacle's future and their family's stability. On one side sat the Fenro Foundation representatives led by Jonathan Mills, with his shark-like smile and immaculate suit. On the other, Veronica and Alex sat shoulder to shoulder, their legal team arranged beside them. Emma had insisted on attending, sitting in her wheelchair at the end of their row. At 11, she was still quite young for court proceedings, though they hoped to shield her from direct questioning entirely. Edison lay quietly at her feet, his service vest identifying him as a medical necessity rather than a pet. 3 months had passed since Emma's hospitalization. 3 months of legal maneuvering, medical recovery, and family adjustments. Emma's seizure had proved to be an isolated incident rather than a pattern of regression. With a modified schedule and increased stability at home, she'd returned to her therapy progression, even reaching new milestones in her physical coordination. The Fenro Foundation's case had evolved from questioning the marriage's legal validity to challenging its genuine intent, as specified in the trust language. They presented financial records showing separate accounts, testimony from building staff about Alex's use of the guest bedroom, and carefully edited media coverage suggesting a marriage of convenience. When it was their turn to respond, Veronica and Alex's legal team took an unexpected approach. Rather than disputing the technical evidence, they reframed the narrative entirely. Your Honor, their lead attorney began, the Fenro Family Trust was established to ensure that controlling interest in Pinnacle luxury resorts remained with heirs who demonstrated commitment to family stability and sound judgment. We intend to show that Mr. and Mrs. Thornwell's marriage exemplifies precisely the values Theodore Fenro sought to protect, regardless of its unconventional beginnings. What followed was not rehearsed testimony, but a series of candid accounts from people who had witnessed their developing relationship. Harold Brennan described how Alex's engineering expertise had already saved Pinnacle millions while improving guest experiences. In my 40 years with this company, I've never seen more practical innovation implemented more efficiently. Emma's physical therapist testified about Veronica's consistent presence at appointments, her detailed notes on exercise protocols, and her modifications to the penthouse to support Emma's recovery. In my professional opinion, Mrs. Thornwell has demonstrated the commitment typical of biological parents, not someone maintaining a pretense. Mrs. Rodriguez described how the family functioned day to day, not as a CEO and her convenient husband, but as partners navigating the complex needs of a special needs child while building a genuine relationship. They finish each other's sentences now, she noted with grandmotherly satisfaction. That doesn't happen with business arrangements. When Alex took the stand, he spoke with the straightforward honesty that had characterized him from the beginning. Yes, our marriage began under unusual circumstances, he acknowledged. And yes, we chose to develop our personal relationship gradually rather than forcing an artificial intimacy. But genuine intent isn't measured by which bedroom people use or whose name is on which bank account. He looked directly at the judge. Genuine intent is shown in daily choices and consistent actions. It's shown when Veronica leaves board meetings to attend Emma's therapy sessions. It's shown when we work together to modify our home for Emma's changing needs. It's shown in the thousand small ways we've chosen to build a family rather than simply maintain a legal arrangement. When Veronica testified, she brought financial records demonstrating Pinnacle's improved performance under their joint leadership. The trust was designed to ensure capable management of family assets. By every measurable metric, our partnership has strengthened Pinnacle's market position, employee satisfaction, and guest experience. But it was her personal testimony that seemed to impact the judge most deeply. Your Honor, I grew up watching a traditional marriage destroy both my parents and nearly ruin our company. They shared a bedroom, maintained joint accounts, and presented a perfect public image while privately tearing each other apart. She glanced at Alex, drawing strength from his steady presence. Alex and I chose a different path. We built a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose before attempting to build a romantic relationship. We prioritized Emma's well-being over conventional appearances. And in doing so, we've created something far more genuine than what the Fenro Foundation is using as their metric for a real marriage. The foundation's attorney cross-examined her aggressively. Isn't it true, Mrs. Fenro, that you married Mr. Thornwell with less than 48 hours of acquaintance, that your entire relationship was predicated on saving your controlling interest rather than genuine affection? Veronica remained calm. I married Alex after recognizing qualities in him that I deeply respected: his intelligence, his devotion to his daughter, his practical approach to problem solving. The trust deadline accelerated our timeline, but it didn't manufacture compatibility that wasn't there. And do you love him now? The question was delivered with a sneer intended to force an uncomfortable admission. Veronica met Alex's eyes across the courtroom. 6 months earlier, she might have evaded the question or offered a diplomatic non-answer. Now she spoke the simple truth. Yes, I do. Not despite our unusual beginning, but because of the person I've come to know through building this life together. The foundation's final strategic move was calling Emma to testify, hoping the girl's directness might reveal weaknesses in their family narrative. It was a miscalculation of epic proportions. Emma wheeled herself to the witness stand with the dignity of someone far older than 11. She answered questions clearly, her occasional speech hesitations only emphasizing her determination to be heard precisely. When asked about Veronica's role in her life, Emma didn't hesitate. She's not just my stepmom, she's become my parent. She doesn't just help me with homework. She sits with me when my head hurts too much to think. She learned all my medicines and therapies. She built a business meeting around my physical therapy schedule. And she never ever treats me like I'm broken. The foundation attorney tried to suggest that Emma's perspective was naive. Wouldn't you agree that adults sometimes pretend to care about children to achieve other goals? Emma's response was devastating in its clarity. I've had brain surgery. I've spent thousands of hours in therapy learning to walk and talk again. I know when someone is pretending to care and when they actually do. Veronica doesn't just say nice things. She shows up even when it's hard, even when it means missing important business stuff. That's not pretending. That's love. The judge's ruling came 3 days later. In a 15-page opinion, she systematically dismantled the foundation's arguments, concluding that the Thornwell marriage not only satisfied the technical requirements of the trust, but exemplified its underlying purpose, ensuring Pinnacle's leadership maintained the family values on which it was built. While unconventional in its formation, the judge wrote, this marriage demonstrates precisely the qualities of mutual support, shared purpose, and genuine commitment that Theodore Fenrose sought to ensure through the matrimonial clause. The court finds no merit in the foundation's claims and affirms Mrs. Thornwell's controlling interest in Pinnacle Luxury Resorts. The victory was complete, not just legally, but personally. As they left the courthouse, cameras capturing the family's unified departure, Veronica realized they had won something far more valuable than controlling interest in a company. They had built a genuine family forged through challenge rather than convention. 6 months after the court ruling, Pinnacle Luxury Resorts launched its groundbreaking accessibility initiative, designed for everyone, featuring innovative accommodation solutions developed through Emma's firsthand insights and Alex's engineering expertise. The Desert Palace Pinnacle's flagship property unveiled its first fully accessible luxury suite that combined beautiful design with practical features for guests with mobility challenges. Far from looking institutional, the rooms incorporated Emma's principle that good accessibility should be invisible until you need it. Pull-out grab bars disguised as elegant towel racks, shower benches that folded seamlessly into wall designs, counters with adjustable heights. Every feature had been tested by Emma herself, ensuring they worked in practice, not just in theory. The media coverage was overwhelmingly positive, portraying Pinnacle as an industry leader in inclusive luxury. More importantly, bookings for the accessible suites exceeded projections by over 30%, demonstrating the untapped market Emma had identified years earlier. At the formal launch event, Veronica stood at the podium in the Desert Palace's grand ballroom, looking out at assembled press industry leaders and Pinnacle executives. Alex sat in the front row, Emma beside him in her best dress, Edison at her feet with a bow tie attached to his service vest. When Pinnacle was founded a century ago, my great-grandfather believed luxury wasn't just about expensive furnishings or exclusive access. It was about making people feel valued, respected, and worthy of the best experiences life offers. She gestured to the displays showing the new suite designs. Today, we're extending that vision to guests who have traditionally been overlooked by the luxury market, not as an afterthought or obligation, but as a recognition that true hospitality means welcoming everyone with dignity and thoughtful accommodation. The applause was enthusiastic, but Veronica wasn't finished. This initiative would not exist without two people who have transformed both Pinnacle and my understanding of what truly matters. My husband, Alex, whose engineering expertise has revolutionized our operational approach, and our daughter, Emma, whose personal experience and brilliant design insights have shown us how to create spaces that work for everyone. The use of our daughter rather than my stepdaughter wasn't planned, but felt entirely natural. In the months since the court case, their family bonds had strengthened beyond legal definitions. Emma had become as much Veronica's daughter as Alex's, a transformation as significant as any corporate achievement. After the formal presentation, as guests toured the model suites, Emma led a special demonstration for a group of children from the Barrow Neurological Institute's Pediatric Rehabilitation Program. Her confidence explaining the design features to kids facing challenges similar to her own brought tears to more than a few observers' eyes. The door handles are designed for people with limited grip strength, she explained, showing how the lever mechanism required minimal pressure. And see how the light switches have both touch and voice activation. That's because different disabilities need different solutions. Alex stood beside Veronica, watching Emma with undisguised pride. She's come so far, he said quietly. Not just physically, but in her confidence. A year ago, she would have been too anxious to speak to a group this size. She's had good examples of courage, Veronica replied, slipping her hand into his, a gesture that had become natural over months of building their relationship. Her father taught her that true strength isn't about never having weaknesses, but about facing them honestly. After the event concluded, the three of them, four, including Edison, returned to the penthouse that had truly become home. The space had evolved over the months, blending Veronica's aesthetic with practical modifications that supported their family life. Photos lined the walls documenting their journey, Emma's therapy milestones, family outings, professional achievements. Most tellingly, Alex had gradually moved from the guest suite to Veronica's bedroom, a transition neither rushed nor artificially delayed, but allowed to develop as naturally as their deepening relationship. That evening, as they sat together on the balcony, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Emma worked on a new design project, sketches for a pediatric rehabilitation center she hoped to build someday. "I've been thinking," she said, looking up from her drawings, "our story would make a good book. How to Build a Family in 48 Hours or Less, an Engineer's Approach." Alex chuckled. "I'm not sure anyone would believe it. The best engineering looks impossible until someone proves it works," Emma replied with the wisdom she'd inherited from her father. "And we definitely work." Veronica couldn't argue with that assessment. What had begun as a desperate business arrangement had transformed into something extraordinary. Not through dramatic romance or perfect circumstances, but through consistent choices, honest communication, and mutual respect that had gradually deepened into genuine love. "You know what else works?" she said, sharing a meaningful look with Alex. "The accessibility initiative was so successful that the board approved the veteran hiring program you proposed." Alex's eyes lit up. This project had been particularly important to him. A program to train military veterans in hotel engineering and maintenance, with accommodations for those with families and health needs similar to what he'd faced after leaving the service. They approved the full proposal, including the family support services. "Every detail," Veronica confirmed. "We start recruitment next month at Fort Campbell." Emma looked up from her sketches. "Does this mean more people like us, families who understand what it's like?" "Exactly," Alex said. "Veterans transitioning to civilian work while supporting families with special needs. People who've walked paths similar to ours." "I could help design their training," Emma suggested immediately. "Show them how to modify standard equipment for different abilities." Veronica smiled at her daughter's instant shift to problem-solving mode, another quality she shared with her father. "I think that's an excellent idea. Who better to explain adaptive approaches than someone who's mastered them?" As darkness settled over the city, stars appearing in the desert sky above them, Veronica reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 1 year earlier, she'd been a solitary CEO facing the loss of everything her family had built, making a desperate gamble on a man she barely knew. Now she was part of a family that operated like the best engineered systems, resilient, adaptive, with complementary strengths that compensated for individual vulnerabilities. The company was thriving under their joint leadership. Emma was flourishing with expanded support and opportunities. And she and Alex had built a partnership that combined the best of business efficiency with genuine emotional connection. "An engineer, a CEO, and a girl with a brilliant mind," Alex mused, looking at his wife and daughter with undisguised love. "Who would have thought we'd make such a good team?" "I would," Emma declared with absolute certainty. "The best systems aren't made of identical parts. They're built from components that work together because they're different, not despite it." As they gathered their things to go inside the city lights twinkling below like earthbound stars, Veronica realized that Emma's insight applied to more than just their family. It described Pinnacle's new direction, combining luxury traditions with inclusive innovation, respecting history while embracing new possibilities. The emergency wedding that had seemed so improbable had led not just to saving a company, but to transforming it into something better than it had ever been. Just as their rushed legal arrangement had grown into a family stronger than any conventional marriage could have guaranteed. What began as a crisis had become their greatest blessing, proving that sometimes the most unlikely foundations can support the most extraordinary structures.